I guess we will call this P&G meeting to order at 4:04 p.m. And let's see. Now I gotta go through different windows here. I guess we need to approve the minutes.
I move we
What?
approve the minutes.
All right, I will second it, and then I think we're all in favor. So I say we move right into it. Kim tells me that we're starting at 5:02.5. Do you guys want me to share my screen? Or does it matter? I know we had such difficulty last time.
Yeah, I'm here, but
Yeah.
I can't follow along. I'm actually on my cell phone. My computer is just not cooperating. So Sean, can you just continue to lead?
I can. Either somebody else needs to do it, or I need to be given
Either
the
or.
ability to share.
Sean, I can do it, or I can give you the ability, either way.
We could also try to see if we can follow along. If we run into another issue, then we could share it too. If you guys
Which number are we starting on again?
I'll just share.
5:02.5.
5:02.5. Thank you, Paul.
Oops.
It's really big.
I'm trying to make it, sorry. I'm going to stop sharing here for a
Oh
second.
my God. So if you lose me, I just got your internet is unstable.
Yeah, mine is going in and out, so you'll probably lose me too.
Mine usually just says I'm unstable.
That's why we
Okay.
have workplace assistants. All right.
All right.
This one's pretty short and sweet.
I think it looks good.
Yep, I'm good.
Does this weapons policy, does ours, like zero tolerance, does that need to be added in there at all? Or is this?
So the zero tolerance piece is actually a state level issue. So that supersedes this. So if what you're talking about is that fourth paragraph there, students bringing firearms to school or knowingly possess firearms at school be expelled for not less than 1 year. So that's state statute. That's when you look down below and you look at the legal reference, that's where that line comes from.
So then the sentence right after that seems to contradict it then. Right? You will not be expelled for less than 1 year, and then you can modify it.
Yeah, so what it is so if the student winds up violating it, then it's a mandatory that an expulsion be recommended to the board. And then that's where you can introduce mitigating circumstances to reduce that factor. I think both of those sentences come right out of state law, right out of statute. I have to go look. I think that whole paragraph might come out of it actually now that I'm reading it more closely.
Well, then it's a poorly written statute, in my opinion. But
I won't disagree with that.
But I don't think I have the authority to rewrite state statutes. So. Guess what? I'm good with it.
Question on this one, with the age of buying tobacco being raised, does that need to be raised in here as well since it says 18?
I would presume the answer to that is yes.
And that's in
Where's
the
the part about age at, Paul? Where's the
third paragraph.
It's written, it's not a number, Matt.
okay? Yeah. Yep, we should change that.
Got it.
And just to be clear, vaping would fall under the category of tobacco then, or tobacco products?
Yeah,
Or
that's
it can
my
even be a
understanding.
controlled substance depending on what's in the vaping device, right? So, yeah.
Other than that age change, I think it looks good.
And the next one's pretty much similar to the first one, so unless there's any objections to that, I think that one's okay too.
I agree. Is there a definition somewhere of what protected student areas means?
Probably not. I mean, my assumption from that one is things like lockers or desks or athletic lockers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes on to list those things later, but the very first sentence says we could do a search of protected student areas, and I was just making the assumption that that's what but I didn't know if there was a legal definition. I was trying to find it farther down, but not seeing it.
And Matt, how do you guys handle, obviously this covers like lockers and whatnot, but how do you handle now that like a lot of kids are carrying backpacks and things? Do those fall under your jurisdiction then, or how does that work?
Yeah, same thing. You know, if we have reasonable suspicion that, they could be carrying something illegal, then we search backpacks too. So.
I guess I'm okay with it. It kind of look to the team to see if this seems like a good reflection of our policy or what we do in practice, I guess.
Yeah, I think it looks good.
There under personal searches, it specifically says backpacks. So to answer Paul's question.
At the elementary level, when we see kids making threats and, 99.9% of the time they just are making the threat. But that's one thing that we'll do as part of the safety plan when the child, comes to school every day or gets on the bus, is check the backpack. And we do that for a temporary time and set the time period for a couple weeks or a month or whatever that looks like. That would be a place or a time that it would happen at the elementary level.
Can you scroll down a little bit there, Sean? Or Kim?
You want me to go down further, Matt?
No, that's perfect.
Okay.
Do you have any concerns about the pat down search and when it says same sex as the student? About just identified sex, or I don't know.
I mean, we discussed changing some identifying sex language already, right, in this policy to make it gender neutral.
I guess I'd just be curious on how that would work if someone decided they didn't have one sex or another, then you don't have anybody like that in the building that also identifies that way, then how would you be able to do the search?
I'll just throw this out there as an option, and it may be completely unrealistic, but can we say of the sex preferred by the student? Like,
I think that's what we probably do in
decide
practice
who
is
they-
the way they'd
Yeah.
identify. I mean,
Self-identification. Yeah.
that's the way it would be handled. So,
Well, I mean, more like they would identify who they felt comfortable doing the search, not necessarily saying, I'm identifying as female, so I get a female. It's more like I would feel comfortable if it was a female or a male. There's a bit of a distinction there, in my opinion, but.
So you're just essentially saying at the student's request.
Yes.
So then there's not really an identification there. Yeah, then the only challenge is whether or not you can actually meet that expectation. I think Matt just said, or somebody said,
Yeah.
maybe it was Paul.
yeah, I don't know. I'm struggling with how we'd word that. I mean, I get the consideration in that piece. It's just because I think you want to be explicit in the policy about what you're doing so you don't mislead people to thinking, you're going to have an awkward situation with a pat down search, but also trying to give this consideration for equity on it. I mean, one thing we could ask Laura for some help on some language for that too, and come back with that one. What number is this one? 5028R1, and just ask her for a sentence about that would be cognizant of that issue. I just think we need some time to kind of wrestle with that language on there if you guys want to make a change. So
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what to say either at this point.
Yeah.
I would be open to having Laura take a look at it, because the more I think about kind of what Tom said, I'd hate for a teacher to be put in an awkward situation where it possibly could be a female student that asks preferred to be
exactly, Paul. That's
Yeah.
That's the same thing I was thinking about. That's why we'd want them to look at it, because we don't want to put our staff in a weird spot either, even if it's at the request of the student. So I think we can come up with something there that probably covers that or accounts for how we would handle that. But we just need some time to work on that to cover that
Yeah.
piece.
I think that'll go on fine, but I kind of went to the next one, Kim, the 502E1, which
Mhm.
is a form, and I just is that what you guys use, or does that need to be replaced, or how do we need that one?
I do not think that is used in practice.
Yeah, these are the exhibits that they recommend. They're not ours.
And I would assume with our
Have something?
I was just thinking with our new threat assessment team that comes online, that might be something that they would probably work towards having.
I mean, our practice would be we would document, search and seizure events in a referral type setting, our documentation is going to be held there about why a search was conducted and what was the result from it and those things. So yeah, I mean, if we're going to have a form, it would come from a team would develop that form. So we can either pull it or come back with something if you guys think it's important to have in there.
Well, I'd be okay with just pulling it because we don't use it.
Would it be good to add a line to the actual policy that just says, if a search is executed, a record's kept, or maybe it was in there. I don't remember seeing it. Though.
Trying to scroll back here to see what it said.
I do like the documentation aspect of it and that it's very well laid out. And if we don't have something like that, maybe Matt, we could just start using this form and put it as part of that disciplinary protocols and procedures book. But you know better how it's being handled, I guess, at the secondary. So I'll defer to you.
Yeah, I just think there's so many of them. I do think the documentation piece is important. Honestly, the form seems pretty extensive for knowing how many searches are conducted and how often, and that if we were going to complete that every time there was a search done. I do think we want some documentation on that piece and have that done. And so maybe like Sean said, just putting in a line that searches that are conducted should be documented would be appropriate. And then
Then that
is a
gives
good
us
question for us to ask.
flexibility, right?
Yeah, about what that looks like and where it's kept. So, because that is one that'll create a ton of questions for an administrator, right? If they conduct a search and they don't have a lot of solid basis and reasoning around why it was conducted, how it was conducted, and all of those components. So, it wouldn't be the worst thing for us to standardize that or check into how we're doing that. I know, like I said, right now they're kept in the referrals, but we could even add something to the referral form that would lay that out a little better and match up with the discipline protocols, like Amy said. I'm just not sure the
Paul's idea
checklist
of
or
having
the form needs to live in your board policy, though. So,
yeah, I agree with that. I think that just having the line say it's going to be documented, and then the idea of the crisis prevention coordinator kind of weighing in on what types of things should be documented or what information we need to keep, I think is good too. And it could be, a completely different form or something similar that we create, but I agree it doesn't need to necessarily live in policy.
okay, well, we'll definitely work on that and make sure that happens. And then if you want to, I don't know, was the previous one when I was looking here, is that the right place to insert a line, Kim? Or maybe all the way at the search and maybe on the
Begin up
initial
here?
search and seizure on 502.8, something like that. We could put it in.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it could fit right after that last paragraph, and actually in that same paragraph that the superintendent's going to develop regulations regarding this policy, and that any searches will be documented or whatever.
Yep.
And honestly, this one I would have to lean on you guys as to what you guys do already.
I think it looks accurate. We ask for it to be done outside the school day as much as possible. Of course, there's instances where it makes more sense to happen during the day, for example, DHS.
I can tell you our general practice is we don't want a law enforcement officer talking to a student unless the parent has been notified. So, I mean, it says we'll attempt to contact the parents to inform them of the request, but you'd be silly if you're a building principal and you let that police officer talk to a student without notifying the parent and having a contact with them. So you could strengthen that language, I think, in there. I think that's a good protection to our kids and our families that that's not going on without, or I mean, it could go from will to shall contact the parents to inform them of the request and ask them to be present, because that's the thing we'd always want to do is we'd want to allow the parent to be there if they so desire when the officer talks to the student. So I don't think one phone call and a message is enough there to assume it's okay to go ahead with that.
And then kind of on a separate note, since it says outside agencies, does that include ICE?
I suppose it would.
My
from the
guess,
standpoint
yeah, it
that
would be.
Yeah, I
but,
don't-
yeah.
It's all encompassing.
But again, our practice on that, right, is we refer all those requests to the superintendent, so the principals don't directly handle those. If they get a call from an ICE agent, there's to call the superintendent to handle that request. And I don't know, Steve, we haven't had any of those instances where they would talk to students directly. I don't think the ICE agents.
No, they've always come through usually a building administrator first, and to be honest with you, we've had a handful of contacts from them, and most of those contacts have actually been about parents or family members and not about our students.
That's right. They're not usually calling to ask about kids. They're
No.
calling to locate an adult.
Yeah.
Is this specific to things that are on our grounds? I'm thinking, you know, kids march down to the Capitol to talk about climate, and there's reporters there and start talking to kids and interviewing them, and their faces and names end up in the paper. It's kind of out of our control.
Right. Because they're off property, and
Yeah,
so
they
we
left
lose our
campus.
jurisdiction as soon as
Yeah.
they leave campus.
This doesn't specifically say that. It just says students aren't interviewed during the school day. So I don't know if we need to specifically say that it only applies to our grounds.
I think there's an implicit piece in there simply because the process itself is all of our all the rules apply only on our property type of thing. Now our property has some extensions. So for instance, you know, when the kids are on the bus, that's our property too. So there's some extension for that, but that's all from a legal definition.
I guess I would only be, I agree that it's sort of, you know, implied in there, but if, you know, we as a district allow the kids to leave and then an interview happens and some recourse, you know, happens, right? There's bad feedback or something happens, it's going to come back to us and say, well, you let them go and then you let them go and talk to people. I don't know if being more explicit instead of implicit gets us
think
there.
we
You might
could-
still get yelled at for letting them leave, but
I think we could run into First Amendment concerns at some point, Sean.
Unless,
No.
Sean, are you looking at it, you want a disclaimer in there that says only while on our property or something to that effect?
yeah, and the
Only
very
use-
first
Oh,
sentence
okay.
just,
Okay,
yeah.
sure.
While in custody,
All right. Yeah, while-
custody is the wrong word, but you know, while in custody of the school district, you know, in local parental
Yeah.
standpoint, you know, while they're on our property and in our care type of thing.
Yeah, I think generally students on school grounds may not be interviewed during the school day, but I would, it's a minor change that I think it gives you a little bit of safety, but
Yeah, a little wiggle room in there, or reduce the wiggle room maybe.
Yeah, you're right. This could be extrapolated out to, if, I see what you're saying.
everybody cool just adding on school grounds right after the word students in that first sentence and calling it good?
Yeah, I
You
think
might-
so.
Or, sorry, now I'm overthinking this. You might say, while in, and this might not be the right
Oh.
terms, Chase, you might have to reflect on it, but while in school care, because now I'm starting to think, Sean, so what if they're on a school field trip, right? They're off campus, but does the bubble of the school authority travel with the teacher while they're on the field trip? And do you therefore have that same level of latitude to exercise care over the students while you're off campus but in our care?
Oh, would you expect that of the teacher?
Yep. I don't know, Chase. I'm maybe overthinking this. That I probably just poured gas on a fire that could have gone out. But
I read this as being, I mean, so my question back is, you mean interviewed by the media? Or are you talking about like the police show up at Coralville Res when they're, or at, School for the Wild?
Yeah. Yeah,
so
exactly. Like ICE shows up at School of the Wild.
Yeah.
Then what? That's the scenario I was putting in my head.
Man,
And I don't know what our authority is. I mean,
I don't know what it is either.
Yeah, that's where I struggle with it. So is it back to
Well,
Sean's
then maybe
point where we're just talking about on campus?
I don't know. I guess maybe we leave it as general as it is.
Yeah,
I don't
and I
know.
don't know why they would.
It wouldn't be
I
a
don't know
PNG
why.
meeting if we didn't.
Right. I mean, I'm not sure why they would take a field trip to the mall, but if they're at the mall and a kid steals something, I don't think that we can step in and say, no, you can't talk to this person you think is committed a crime.
Yeah.
Steve on the other side of that. Now, I don't know what their protocol is, probably to call the parents, right? I mean, but there's a lot of loose ends on this one.
Yeah, there are. There are.
I mean, I understand what the general intent is, and then but then when you start pulling on the threads, you're right. There are a lot of different circumstances that could come up.
That's why that's way back at the beginning. That's why I was going with the implicit idea that this is while in our care type of thing, and then not stating it may actually give us broader latitude than stating it, which may then start to restrict us.
Yeah, I noticed there is, Iowa code references down below. I mean, maybe there's something to that gives better definition or something. I don't know. Guess maybe we leave it for now. I don't know. We're down the rabbit hole now.
Yeah. Part of me feels like these have been vetted on some level, right? So they somebody somewhere thought that this was enough protection for a school district. When we get in these ones where we're like, do we unpack this or not unpack it? Like, makes me feel better a little bit, whether that's right or wrong.
Are we leaving it or what?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think we leave it after kind of walking through that process.
All right, moving on. Favorite yellow box.
Isn't, I mean, I know it asks for something in the yellow box, but isn't that part of state law, or is that because it's within a mile?
Can you ask that again, Paul?
Yeah, I said I know that it's asking for some sort of criteria in there, but if you if you're eligible for a student driving permit, aren't there certain like rules and regulations as to when you can drive to and from school and school activities now?
Yeah, there's
I
a
haven't had a driver for a while,
code
but I
section
think it's a
around
mile.
that.
Yeah, I don't,
The way I read it is that there is a, like if you live within a mile, you're not just, you don't have the ability to get a driving permit, but there may be reasons why you could get around that rule. And that's what the criteria is what gets around that rule.
Yeah, I think you're right.
But to Paul's point, that seems like weird that we as a school district would define that as opposed to, you know, the DOT.
Exactly.
Do we ever get requests for students who live within a mile of school to get a school permit? And how do we handle those? And do we use a criteria to allow it?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not actually sure that we screen for that.
I mean, yeah, they don't,
If
they
you
haven't
want
come
the
to
honest answer.
transportation. Yeah,
Yeah,
they probably go right to the buildings, right?
they either, well, or they show up at my door on a Saturday afternoon, which is a regular behavior. And I can tell you that the first thing I don't do is get their address out, get the Google map out, and try to determine from the postal code of the school district whether or not it is exactly a mile to the door.
So the criteria is if they show up on your doorstep?
That's pretty much the criteria. If they're on my doorstep with the form filled out and their parents drag them along, I sign it, and I'm not sure what the other principals are up to, but I'm unaware of anyone having been denied.
And I think Steve and I, we had this conversation before too. I think school board members can technically sign those too, as long as they can vouch for the student.
Absolutely. I think Director Kirschling went through that, did he not?
I know that I signed at least one when my daughter's friend, so
Yeah.
I know it's out there. But I'm okay with just taking the whole paragraph out if we don't actually enforce that.
That's what I was going to say. Let's just take
Yeah, I
that
think
out.
that's the easiest way to deal with that.
So remove that paragraph. Are we good to move on?
Yep.
Yes.
Now we're getting into some meaty stuff.
Try not to sneeze into the microphone there.
I just have a quick question. Does this language have to match that language of the zero tolerance policy we had to come up with recently?
I think that's a really good question, Ruthina.
So it doesn't sound like any of us have the answer for you on that one, Ruthina.
Okay, I was just like, dang it, my microphone's not working. Nobody heard me.
Nothing but crickets.
And I guess
I do think it does, right? Go ahead, Paul.
Well, I was just gonna, if you're gonna continue to talk about that, that's fine. I had a question about the fourth paragraph, so.
Yeah, that's what I was going to point out, Paul, is the definition of assault. And we know our students or our staff, unfortunately, from time to time are injured by our students. And I don't think it, well, again, it goes back to the definition of assault, but we certainly don't suspend necessarily a student that's maybe kicked a staff member.
And then also to that point, like the second sentence in there, I think it says notice of the suspension. If you did suspend someone, is sent to the board president. Then the board will review the suspension, decide whether to hold a disciplinary hearing. I don't know that that happens until you get to the point where you guys are saying that you should expulse, you recommending expulsion to us.
Yeah, we certainly don't send suspensions your way.
No.
Just below that paragraph, right, it has definitions of assault and the 3 little bullet points. The first one is the most gray. The other 2 are pretty on the nose, I think, but. Kim, can you scroll it down a little bit just to see those a little clearer? There, perfect. So that first bullet point, you know, as Amy said, if somebody kicks a staff member, I don't think they're kicking them because they think it's going to feel good, right? I mean, it's intended to cause pain, but it's also just acting out, right? Like it's hard to define an intent there. So that one, I guess, is the most concerning one to me. To be in a policy, yeah, I guess, you know what I mean?
Kind of like the discussion we had a couple of months ago at policy and governance when we were looking at the new policy that we had to put forth because of, you know, where we were at with OSHA. I mean, it just is the landscape in which we find ourselves, you know, trying to figure out how to best bring our kids along, think about restorative practices, not jumping to automatically using suspensions anymore. Meanwhile, to protect the health and safety of our staff. So it's just shows you again that the difficult situation we find ourselves in. And you can see that this policy feels rather punitive. And that's necessarily how we try to act or react. But we also know what the landscape across the country and the state, even our neighbors in central Iowa, you know, what they've been experiencing with staff as well. So, yeah.
Is it, is it as easy as changing the will be suspended to may be suspended?
For sure. And I think all those things come into play that, you know, would normally come to play. Think about the age of the child, the level of understanding that a particular child could have, where there are other, I don't know, weapons involved or items involved with it. Is it the first time? All of those things would be what we're considering. But I think May does definitely help in that paragraph.
Is everybody cool with changing the will to may in that
Yeah, I'm okay with that part. And then I guess I would just, every sentence that's after that may need to be either taken out or changed a little bit since we don't actually do that. There's also some wording up in the top about the paragraph right before that where it's talking about disciplinary measures include but aren't limited to removal from the classroom. And then if you go down to the end, after this paragraph, it says like removal from the classroom means the student is sent to the building principal's office. And I don't know that it's not necessarily the building principal's office. If you have like a dean of students or someone who's in charge of disciplinary, it may not be the principal. Could be somebody else's space. So I think there's just some things that need to be cleaned up in there if we don't actually do those things.
Yeah. How about we pull that one as well and have Kate and maybe Laura Gray even work on it?
Because they may haven't been able to look at it, but I think we also want to make sure, like you were talking about the other policy that we did in response to OSHA, to make sure that they don't contradict each other in some way. I don't know what that might be, but to make sure that they are in concert as well. And Ruthina, was that the zero tolerance policy you were talking about? Was the one we did in response to OSHA?
Yeah,
okay.
that's
I wasn't sure. So, but we'll pull it as well and kind of look at them.
Yeah, that's good. And just a quick question. Do you know, one of the other things that said in there was that detention could happen on a non-school day. Do we ever do that?
I'm not aware of anything that we would do like that anytime we would do something at the elementary level, but I can't speak to secondary.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we have the breakfast club operating anywhere for Saturday school.
That was my follow-up. I was really hoping that happens. If it happens, but.
You were going to volunteer to watch the kids, is what I just heard, Paul.
Yeah, I can make them run a paper, right? Isn't that what they're saying?
Just don't leave them alone in the library.
Or to run amok in school in general.
Yeah, so I think if you guys just pull that one and add that to the pile that Lisa's going to look at, and that would be great.
This just looks like a lot of definitions for us.
Well, this is a regulation for the policy before, so wouldn't you pull this and have Kate and Laura look at this with the policy?
I would agree with that.
We could say the same then for the next few pages, I think.
You have like the fines and fees and things of that nature. Aren't those in the student handbook then?
Yeah, and I think those are board approved every spring.
So this one's probably okay. I know there's some guidelines for the next one that talk about how that should be done for waivers and whatnot. And then I guess my question for that one is that what we do? And then some of those things I'm not necessarily familiar with those terms because we use maybe some other terms, but
Okay, so are you comfortable looking at that and knowing that that's accurate? Otherwise, we could give that to Les. I think that's accurate from my understanding, but I don't know if there's, slight changes that need to be made.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and and let's have Les look at it, and then maybe even Allison too, when we talk about child nutrition.
When we get the sheet to approve the fees and stuff on it, there's 3 columns. I think it's like regular and reduced, and I don't know, maybe it doesn't have free on there, but it has the different prices for everything on there. I'm not sure what if it says anything about temporary waivers.
No, I think you're right. I think it just has the 3 columns: full pay, reduced price, and free.
But Sean, I'm okay too if we use a form like this, that there are temporary waivers for situations like what we're going through now.
Agreed. I'm just saying I think that we have the language in there for what full and partial fee and fine waivers are, but I don't know that it's really defined anywhere what temporary waivers are, or this is the first I've even heard that as a thing. I agree. I like it.
Yeah. The other piece I don't know is, are there fees at the building level that the building principals might be waiving without us even knowing in the finance office? And so, if you want us to take a deeper look at it, we can, just to make sure it's consistent.
I mean, everything.
Go ahead. No, I was just gonna say, I mean, I don't think it's an issue if they take a deeper look into it, just to make sure we have consistency across the board.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm just thinking of all the fees that there could be, and I don't know, like you said, Chase, which ones are waived, like cap and gown fees, or sometimes parking ticket fees, or however large parking regulations. They end up getting waived possibly, so the kid can graduate.
Yeah, that's what I don't know, and to Rathina's point, is that being done consistently at all of our buildings? Okay.
At the bottom of that previous page, it said something about the temporary stuff, right? That last paragraph.
Yeah, so Chase, did you say you were gonna have Les take a look at that one then?
Yeah, we will. And we probably need to talk with at least the secondary principals, in terms of what some of the practices are and whether or not we need to be more specific in there, or just make sure they're all using the same approach.
Yeah, I would agree. Maybe principals would it help to check with, say, athletic directors or music department too.
Yeah.
Is that form the one we use, or is that just something that came from ISB?
I think it's an E is an exhibit that they gave to us to supplement the policy.
I assume we have a form or something that people have to fill out to qualify. We either need to have in here that we use or not have the exhibit at all in there, like we talked about on the earlier policy.
And we do have, we have a couple of different forms in terms of, for free and reduced lunch, and then related to transportation. So we'll add that, Kim, as we look at this about, which forms do we need to standardize it?
Okay.
I'm okay with this one as is, unless anyone has changes.
I'm good with it as well. I know this came up in one of the other P&G meet or some other meeting that we talked about. I don't remember which one it was.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any changes, but I know it came up in another meeting.
We talked about it at a work session when we were discussing vaping.
Oh, there we go. Only on this one, again, I think we might want to just double check to make sure the language matches up to that policy that was just implemented under OSHA.
Yeah, I agree with that, Ruthina. The thing that I would say is most of what I'm reading in here is just straight verbatim from chapter 103.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Jason, Matt and I can take a look at that. But again, I think that especially those using reasonable force, that's for sure out of chapter 103.
Okay.
But
yeah,
so
I think I was just mainly thinking that whatever we have here doesn't contradict that policy, especially if this comes directly out of chapter 103.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing we want to do and with that is because there's probably a similar policy in the 400s. And so we can also make sure that, and I don't think we made any changes to that one either, probably for the same reasons that it was right out of 103, but we can make sure that they reflect each other. So we're sharing the same information in both places.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks.
Kim, that reference is at the bottom for the one that would be in the 400s. Think, yeah, 402.3.
I don't have any problems with the student government one. It's a weird one, but I do know that this is something that maybe Matt would have been able to answer, but I know from reading in the Little Hawk newspaper that City High was trying to change the way that their membership was made up. And so I know some of this talks about elections, which may not happen. So I don't know if we need this policy. Obviously, it's good to say the students can have a government, but it may be different school by school.
unless Steve wants to answer some of these next few, I wonder if we should skip over them and wait till Matt comes back on the call. Because I'm not real familiar with the next few.
So I would say that just to make sure that there have not been any changes that I'm not aware of, just because Matt's been working closer with the secondary administrators, I think it's probably better to hold on those and let him review those offline and come back and just give us a quick update on that. So I think if there's a cluster of those that you want him to take a look at, Kim, I think we can just forward him a note and have him review those and respond back to the committee.
Through what policies were you thinking, Amy? I know probably through publications.
Yeah, if we could go to student progress reports and conferences as the next one.
Okay, let me just make a note of that through 504.6. Okay.
504,
Got it.
point 1 through whatever.
I think it was 6. Yep.
Yeah, that'd be great if you can take a look at it. Then I know I do have some questions from when I read through those before. So, but those will be something that Matt would answer. So I'll just wait to see what he says on these.
You might just want to change semester on this one to trimester, or maybe just term.
Term would be nice and flexible.
Okay.
It's in a couple places on that paragraph.
And then also, do we have the third trimester parent-teacher conferences?
Typically,
no.
only parent-teacher conferences once a year in the fall and in the spring.
Good. Moving on with the changing of semester to term.
Got it.
So this is my not my favorite topic, retention. I would say that language in there looks like that we would be giving lots of permission, or that we believe that retention is best practice, and that's not what the research would suggest. So, you know, as much as possible, we do not want our staff promoting that, and we've armed at least the elementary principals with a bunch of retention articles by Delta Kaplan study or meta-analyses on what the research has said over time. With that being said, we will sometimes have staff members still bring this to the attention of a principal and or parents doing it. So it's not that it's unheard of, it's not that we don't allow for it at all, but what we typically do is hold a meeting, gather individuals around the table, including the parent that know the child best, weigh the pros and cons, and then also share what we know about what the research says. Lots of times the parents will take it away, think about it, and you know, then the retention is off the table. Sometimes they're very adamant and it's not a hill that we're going to die on, and then we ask the principals to have the parent write a letter, say that they've understood what the current research is stating around retention, and we place it in the child's CUME file, and then they're allowed to be retained. That's more of our practice at the elementary level, at least. And it is one going to be on everybody's radar. We're going to see a lot of people asking for this, I'm afraid, not just at the kindergarten level.
So could you, Amy, do you think it would be better to kind of spell out what you just said we do there as a, so people know? And then also would that apply to the second half of this where it's acceleration or moving students up? And just before we answer, I just want to welcome Matt back and let him know that he missed the part that we really needed him for just now. So
there you go.
Very convenient, huh?
Yeah,
Sorry.
We assigned you some homework.
All right, great. That's what happens when you miss a meeting. You get more work to do. So understood.
It wasn't me that did it.
I think we can.
I don't believe that.
Matt, you need to be gone more often. We'll just get through this series way faster.
There you go.
And Paul, I think we could just add an administrative guideline. So I think that would work. We could put a guideline right behind this one. I would say, and I'm gonna give the nod to Diane over there, but I do feel like our acceleration process is probably better outlined than our retention process.
So stick with the policy as it is and then add a guideline. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah. Yeah, and I might even think of, let me see what is the retention. You know, I think we need to recognize in here that parents often bring this to us as well. And so it's really stated that the staff is bringing it to the parents. And so if we could show that it's going both ways, I think that would be helpful. And maybe we simply say that in the second sentence. We also recognize that at times parents bring this to staff as well.
That's okay. Or, I mean, do you need it just in that like retention? So the retention of a student will be determined based upon the judgment of the district's professional staff or by the request of the parent?
That will work too. Matt, I don't know how long you've been on the call, but I kind of outlined just where we've been recently, philosophically, at least with the retention piece. So I know that that fits for my approach at the elementary. I'm not sure if you even are getting those requests besides maybe an initial placement as kids are coming into the district.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be as much of a concern for us retention wise, because so much is based on credits, grades 9, 12. The credits they've accumulated really determines kind of where they're at in their sequence. But yeah, I mean, the implications of the current situation are just different about, I think, rigor in the courses they're taking or where they're slotted. And we've talked about that a little bit, Amy, but I don't think as far as retention promotion, that's going to be a huge one. I mean, I could see a couple, 1 or 2 offs popping up from 8th grade to 9th grade potentially, but I don't think we'll have the numbers you guys may see around that.
Okay. So Kim, did you get those notes on the changes? I think that just those first 2 bullet points, you could add that in there. We would be okay.
I got it.
All right, moving on.
Matt, do you want to maybe touch on that last sentence in the first paragraph? Is that it's not necessarily true, is it?
Yeah, I don't think that's probably accurate.
Because let's say if you had a homeschool student that was homeschooled for 9th grade, then came to the public schools for 10 through 12, and then or earned a scholarship or whatever, or an academic letter, like homeschooling, they're not necessarily enrolled in any of our classes, but they can attend, they can play sports, right?
Yeah, I don't think that's probably an accurate statement. I think there's situations where we would have students in that situation for one reason or another that come in at a certain point and be eligible for honors or awards. I mean, you could even think about that from English language learner students coming to our district at a certain time in their certain age and completing school at some point and being able to achieve honors or awards, and maybe they weren't in formal education somewhere prior to that. But
so we could,
I don't know, Diane, am I missing anything on that one that you think about? I mean, I don't think we're probably strict adherence to that, so it probably doesn't make a lot of sense to have that statement in there.
Right, I questioned it when I read it too. I think
Yeah.
it should probably take it out.
Sounded a little Canadian there. Out.
She is channeling her inner Chris Lynch.
All right, testing. Yay. Okay, that's just weird. It has a heading of testing program, and then it doesn't really talk about testing at all.
Yeah, testing makes you think like academic testing, and it's really talking about testing of like more in the realm of the guidance and counseling services, and then some catch-alls about what it shouldn't be asking without consent. What's the next one that follows it?
Graduation requirements. Yeah, I guess I'm confused on this one a little bit too, especially the last sentence. I'm not quite sure exactly what we're talking about. I don't know how the board can review and approve it.
Yeah, I don't even know what to do with this one. I mean, I think it's good information that no student's required to answer some of these questions, but I don't know how it fits here in this policy.
I guess, is it just saying that like we need to have a test like the Iowa, whatever they're called now, ISIPs or whatever they are, but you can't ask any of those questions when you give that test?
I think it's talking more about, the Iowa Youth Survey or, culture and climate surveys or conditions for learning surveys, any of those surveys as well as our assessments that, yeah, students would not be asked to provide any of that information.
So then in that case, I'm okay with the policy. The heading is weird to me. Like it would, maybe if we change the heading, it would not make us as confused.
Does the heading tie, does anybody know how the heading ties to the legal reference?
I don't. But I was thinking probably of the same lens that Diane. I mean, the Iowa Youth Survey or some of those other ones would be relevant to it, or if you did have some kind of a test that would accompany some additional questions in some way, that we shouldn't be asking those without prior consent.
Yeah, it talks about survey and leads with the guidance and counseling. So I don't like the testing programs either. Maybe we just change the heading to, I don't know, social emotional surveys, evaluations, something like that.
I don't know. I mean, are we even following this? I mean, that's a problem too. Like, so if you think about those examples Diane threw out with the, say that student culture survey, I mean, we're not asking for written consent before we ask some of those questions, right? That would create some difficulty for us with this policy.
Don't we
right?
usually send out some kind of notice ahead of time? I was actually trying to go back and look. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, we send a
Yeah, we
notice,
do.
but
Yeah.
the language
They can
about
opt out.
But there's
Yeah,
not
but-
a permission in there, is there?
That's what I'm saying, right? We don't say
Yeah.
without prior written consent. We do notice,
Yeah.
which could be consent. But
I think you're right. I don't think that's in there.
we would need to change to without the prior consent of the parent and take out written consent, because we could still get consent from notice, but
Well, we use an adverse consent, actually, don't we? Isn't the adverse consent that unless you say no, we give it to you?
right, that's what I mean. So you could say we
Yeah.
provided notice and they can opt out, but
Yeah,
we don't do
Yeah.
written consent for all those things.
right. It's adverse consent.
But
And I
isn't-
think, just looking at that bulleted list though, I don't think any of those questions are on those surveys.
I don't think they are either.
Well, I think sex behavior and attitudes would be.
But isn't this thing in the second paragraph, the way it starts out, it says the student's not required to answer or to reveal that information? Like, you could ask it, but they're not required to answer it. So if they left it blank and like whoever they gave it to was like, oh no, you got to answer this. Like, we don't do that, right? Like they don't answer, they don't answer.
Yeah.
Other thing, when we display our data, we're definitely using student ID. So that's how we're able to get all the subgroup data. So while it says in there income, in an indirect way, we are getting that information.
I mean, I think it works
But
if
that's
you
not,
probably change the heading of what it is to better reflect it, and then we just adjust that consent language around it. I mean, there's other things, illegal, antisocial, self-incriminating, demeaning behavior. I mean, there's illegal activities they would report on. Have they engaged in drug use or, alcohol use? And technically those are illegal, right? So I think there's some of those things in there is probably helpful for us to know, but at the same time, like Amy said, we protect their responses so that they're not correlated back to the individual in that sense. And then just how we go about getting the consent has just been a different practice. So we'd want policy to match that.
What if you just titled it student surveys? And then maybe change that first paragraph.
Probably more descriptive.
You could say student surveys, and then you could say student surveys are established and maintained to evaluate the education program of the school district, and go on from there.
I was thinking if you just remove the word testing from the sentence, just that a comprehensive program is established. And that includes surveys and whatever other things you want to throw in.
I'm okay with the change of that language and from testing to surveys or whatever you guys said, and the change in that first paragraph. So then in that last paragraph, we don't necessarily approve those going out as a board, right?
I'd be inclined to take that last sentence out.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
I mean, we review them. You do share them with us, but like,
I was going to say, if you wanted to leave something in, you could say the board will, periodically receive results of these surveys, or you could just take it out of there because you're not you're not approving the evaluation and testing program, obviously. So.
yeah, and I'm totally okay with leaving the part about us reviewing them, because we do that and we use that to guide some of our work. So leaving that part in, but we don't approve it beforehand of what's going out necessarily.
So it's the responsibility of the board to review the evaluation or review the results of the program or something like that.
Yeah, I would be more likely to say to review the results.
And then Kim, did you catch the part about the consent piece there too, to make that change?
Yep, I got that. It'll be without the prior notice to parent.
Yep. As long as the other members were okay with that, I think that better matches what we're doing and what's reasonable.
Everyone, I have to step off, so have a good rest of the meeting and a good weekend. Board members, will see you next week.
We will assign you homework as
I was
well.
gonna say, it sounds like
Please do.
your turn for homework
Please
now.
do.
Last
Bye,
62
Chase.
pages are all yours, Chase.
Awesome.
See you, Chase. So we need to put in the right amount of credits, obviously.
Yeah.
So high school is 310. Is what our current policy says.
Yeah.
Government would be 10 credits, history 15, financial literacy would be 5. We also have econ that should be listed there. Economics should be 5. But those 4 that I just said, government, history, financial literacy, and econ, are all part of that social studies 45. So it's not in addition to the 45 social studies, they make up part of that. So I don't know how you can maybe, you want to phrase that or make that look a little different?
How about we leave the little asterisk there and put it on all of them, and then just say, instead of beginning with graduating class of 2021, we say these are also included in the social studies total.
So the other thing to consider there, and maybe Diane could help with this, is are there other specifics in those other subject areas that we're not breaking out? So then does it make sense just to break out social studies, or do we want to break out those other areas, or should we just leave a general number for each of them and follow up with more detail?
Right.
Either regulation or something else.
Our current policy just has that general number there. I didn't know, Iowa code specifically states government, American history, financial literacy. So I think that's why that's in here. Where Iowa code doesn't specifically state, you know, biology or earth and space science, even though that's what we do.
And Matt, are these somewhere else? Do these live in the student handbook too, or wherever the breakdown of what exactly you need, like the sciences?
Yeah, we'd have those in the program of studies and yeah, those pieces. So maybe with what Diane said there, it does make sense then to leave those on there. If they're in code, then we could just like do what Sean said and asterisk them and put them under the social studies realm since they're specified in code.
I'd be totally fine with that.
And then our PE is actually 20 credits. But then we list health. So we do PE/health, but we actually have a health requirement of 5 credits.
That should be, wording should be changed from semester to credits then as well.
Yes.
$25 semesters of PE would be a lot of PE.
Would be a lot. And then we have, so that line about special education, Lisa Glenn gave us a different line. So I don't know if you'd want to put what hers was in, but we had this on our last change for our graduation policy. Hers said all students with individualized education programs must meet ICCSD's graduation requirements. IEP teams may determine that these requirements can be met in a unique and individualized manner. So she's saying that in addition to the 4333 that they're listing there, that our IEP students will meet all of these. So the health and the PE, the financial literacy, all of those, but may do that in a unique and individualized manner.
Seems like we should add that to me.
And is that something we're doing now? Like I know in this it says beginning with the class of 2022, but is that something they're doing now then? Like can we take that part of it out?
I know that was just a recent requirement of the state, so I'm not quite sure if all graduates are under that currently. And then Matt, we also have a line in ours, and I know this has been a little bit of a contention, that says all students are required to register for 5 classes. So I don't know if you want that in there or if you just want to leave that kind of in a handbook format. That's been challenging for some of our seniors who, you know, they only need 2 more classes to graduate, and to say that they need to take 5 sometimes is a challenge.
I think we could just leave that in the handbook because it is a challenge, and so that gives some flexibility if there's a situation we want to grant. Did you say it's in the current policy, Diane? The 5, or it's just living in the handbooks now?
No, right now it's on our current policy.
That's probably why it made it to the handbooks.
Is it in a policy as a graduation requirement or just a requirement of students?
On the graduation requirement policy, our current 505.5, it says all students are required to register for 5, actually it says for 5 classes plus PE, which I don't think is our practice.
Well, my general advice would be to leave it in there because I think what it does, we still exert flexibility, to be honest with you on that one, guys, around kids that maybe it's a challenge for a legitimate reason. But if we don't have that in there, then we start running into students that maybe have enough credits that only want to show up to campus 1 or 2 periods a day, you know, and that can become problematic for different reasons too. So, I mean, I'd be okay with leaving it in there, the 5 of 7, and then we just demonstrate some flexibility around when that could be waived or allowed to look differently. Sometimes it's like a work situation or a family situation we're trying to help with, but.
And FYI, I don't think we're following that right now.
Yeah. That's what I mean. So we're granting a lot of exceptions around it, but I think if we open the door completely on it, it'd be a little problematic because then there's no threshold to start from. But we have a lot of kids with open periods.
My only point on that though is I don't think we're even close to following it. I think rather than 5 plus 1, I think right now what they're doing is 4 plus 1. So I think if it is policy and we want to keep it as policy, what we really ought to do is we got to sit down with the building principals and figure out, and the C&I team, and figure out what do we want policy to actually be, and then make sure that policy is reflecting practice. Because if policy is not reflecting practice, we'll get burned on that. So I don't have a problem keeping it in. I just think we need to figure out what we're actually requiring kids to do and make sure that whatever we are requiring kids to do, that's what the policy says. And like I said, right now, I think it's 4 plus 1.
Yeah, the +1 point that she was talking about, I don't think we're doing that at all. So
because I think
we can take that back to a secondary admin team and bring that back to you about what's maybe better going on. So that's
I only say that because I think a lot of seniors have PE waivers, and I think that's why that comes into play. So just FYI.
So it's 5 plus or minus 1?
Well, I think it is if you have, I don't think that you're not required to take PE if you have a PE waiver. So I think you have a lot of seniors that have 5 classes. So they're not taking 5 plus PE because they've gotten a waiver from PE. So they already have 2 open periods. So just an FYI. So I don't have a problem leaving it in policy either. I just think we ought to make sure policy reflects practice.
And then I'm not sure, but we've listed electives there. We have 85 credits, which that's how you get to the 310 that's up above. So if you want to list that separate or not. And then Matt, would we want to talk about the core diploma?
Yeah, eventually we're going to bring you guys a piece on a core diploma for our EL students where they would just complete the core sequence and not the elective components. And so maybe the best thing to do on this one is to have that conversation about what makes sense around that 5 plus 1 or 4 plus 1 category, and then also present that core diploma piece to you at that same time. Because I think it'll be linked to our diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. It's a great piece that's come out of our English language learner team to set a path for kids to graduation that enter our system potentially a little late, that they can accumulate core credits and have a pathway to graduation without a focus on some of the elective credits. And so or even if they don't interrelate, just with the focus on the language and the core. So what would you guys think about that? We could bring both of those things back first to policy and governance before they're presented as I do think on some level we wanted to present that core piece to the whole board, just because it's a real positive and it's a good thing for us. So we might not want to wait till all the board policies are packaged to do that, but at least for a conversation here first would probably be good.
Yeah, I think just like you said, if you present it to the board, I mean, I think it's great. And then we'll just add it into our policy packet.
And in here, yeah.
Yeah, and then we'll
So we can fix this and then brief you guys maybe in some more detail on that next time. Diane, does that sound like a okay plan to you from our conversations we've had with Laura?
Yep, that sounds good.
Okay.
Cool. With that, we're, I think, at a good stopping point, 5:30, if that's okay with everybody else. I would ask that maybe Kim send around a doodle poll again so we can get some more dates on the calendar so we can hopefully get this knocked out sooner rather than later.
Hey, Ruthina, can we just do the next two because they're super short? And I think they're okay the way they're worded, unless someone else has any changes to them. Then we can cross those off our list.
Sure. Does anybody have any changes to them?
I'm okay with the 505.6.
What about
looks pretty straightforward, too.
505.7?
Those will both look okay to me from the first glance there.
Yeah,
Seem good to me.
Yep, good with both of those.
Yep. Yep.
Not bad. Over halfway done.
You made it. Yeah, halfway through them.
I would move to adjourn.
Second.
I am in favor.
I'm gonna think about it here for a second, Sean.
I figured you would. You get back to me on that. I might not be here.
No, I also am in favor. And just Matt, for the record, just so you know, it was all of 504. That whole series were the ones we wanted you to look at.
I'll send you an email, Matt.
The 504.
Yeah, so it's like 504 point whatever, 1 through 5 or whatever it is.
Like 1 through 0.6, something like that. It's all very secondary specific.
Well, thanks so much.
It's the rest of this.
Appreciate it.
It's the rest of the series.
All right.
The rest of us just weren't sure.
And you're assuming I am, so
Yes,
great,
we were.
great vote of confidence. I'll get
Uh-huh.
them. I'll get them looked at. Thank you.
I think we're all adjourned. So
Night,
I'll see you
everyone.
guys, I don't know, not that long, probably, a couple days.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah,
Actually, Saturday, Sean.
yeah,
I was gonna
Saturday.
say, Saturday morning, you'll see some of us. All right.
Bye.
Yeah.